Okay, I think this is working. I just had to download a whole new piece of software, but I think this is working. So, hi Jamie. You have to excuse the setting and all that shit, but let's get down to it. So, you want to learn how to edit your photos. So that things like shadows, let's get it up. You said. Okay. Jamie Bowles. Right. Okay. How do I see this full screen? So it's something like, yeah, so these kind of images. So when you, yeah. So you got shadows under here. You got highlights up here. And specifically a shitload of highlights here. And what you want to do is like equalize it so that there's not, like this image, a situation where you can't see, well, you can see jack shit basically in this. Really lovely composition, by the way, because you obviously get mirrored. But there's no detail in the blacks. It's nicely exposed in the sky, but it's a ball lake, right? Okay, so it's really easy, basically. But it's tricky if you don't know what you're doing. So, I've got some here together, tutorials. Okay, so this is Lightroom. Lightroom's what I use, and it's what probably 90% of people use. GIMP's kind of a weird software. It's really cool that you use it, but if you have a friend or if yourself, you can just pirate this. Just get a pirate copy on the Pirate Bay. It's what I use for years and years and years and years. It's great. It'll sort you out. But the tools on this are basically the same tools as on GIMP, I'm sure. I've not used it, but if it's an image editor, you can do this kind of shit. So I'll just run through what I would do for images like you gave me. So, first things first, your camera has the option to shoot JPEG or RAW, two different types. So, RAW is, instead of .jpeg at the end, it says .dng, well, it says .raw, RAW. But the Canon version is DNG. So the benefits to DNG images, RAW images, is that it's the whole image from the camera. So when you take an image on like an iPhone, it will take the image at RAW quality, big, like fuck off file size, like 30 megabytes for an average photo. And then what it'll do is, this is your histogram here. It's kind of a weird little, like, advanced thing to worry yourself about, but easy things to think about is this here is the shadows, and this here is the highlights, and this here is the middle of the image, which is like perfect in between. So what you ideally want is this little curve that's going on here to be perfectly in the middle, because you see just here it says exposure. So you're talking about highlights there, shadows there. So you want here the bulk of the information to be in the middle, perfectly exposed. Now what we've got in this image, because it's quite a dark image, you can see, is a big spike here in the shadowy bit. So what you ideally want is this to be all scooched over to, like, let's try to do it, but see what I mean? More like a middly type thing. But I'll show you how to do that. This is a dirty way of doing it, but basically the problem you're having at the minute is that RAW images is what you should be using. You're probably using JPEG. The JPEG style image, you see this little block here where it says white here. On a JPEG image, this is just cut out. They just get rid of it because most cameras automatically will set themselves to take the perfect exposure, but you can't do that when there's something like loads of shadows like this or loads of brightness like this. See the difference? So this is shadowy down here and really bright on this image, so there's a big spike towards the center side of things. So what you need to do is start shooting RAW, which will be bigger file sizes, but it doesn't lose the highlights here and the shadows here. So when you go into software like this and try to edit it up and recover the detail in the shadows, you can still do it, because you've got 30 megabytes worth of data to deal with, as opposed to 5 megabytes of data worth to deal with. That's the first thing. Now you can do it with JPEG images. It's just a bit of a ball ache. So your best bet, let me get this full screen. Your best bet, say you had an image like this. You got two main methods of doing it. First method is quite a dirty way of doing it, and you won't get a good representation of it here because it's a raw image. So any effect that I do on this will be a billion times better than you'll be able to get with JPEG. But basically, come down to your sliders here, and you'll have these in GIMP. GIMP? Yeah, GIMP. Is GIMP right? Let me check. Yeah, so you've got GIMP. And yeah, it looks like you can do stuff like shadows. Yeah. So, okay. So long story long, in an image like this, I specifically exposed the camera so that when I looked in the back of it, I could see that there was a nice sky in the top. It was like a nice looking sky, but I had no detail in the shadows here. Now, I also this is why I've chosen these images, because I've also got an image here which is really bright highlights. So the issue is that it's too bright here, but quite nicely exposed down here. So what you'd do is, say you shot this image, you would grab your shadow slider, because your shadows are what you want to deal with, and just bring it up like that. And then you could even do some blacks, maybe not blacks. Maybe, okay, so I won't go too crazy into like dehazing and all that shit. But you just need to see what the software can do to recover the shadows. Now, it'll be a lot better if you're shooting in RAW as opposed to JPEG. But first things first, just see if you can recover the shadows. Now, in an image like the one you had before, where there's just such a big difference between light and dark, your second thing you could do, without like messing too much with the exposure. See, this is essentially what you could do is do what I did here and take 2 images. So one on a tripod, and then take it at, you can see here my settings. So this was taken at 160th of a second, f4.5. I don't know why I shot f4.5, that's stupid. Should have shot like f10, but whatever. So it's shot at 160th of a second, which is relatively quick. And then this image here, you can see that it's shot at 120th of a second. So what I did is instantly took one picture, scroll, the little wheel that you can change the speed of your thing, but I'll show you all that when we meet up and like, get into cameras and shit. But basically, you just change it so that it's shooting a bit quicker. This is if you're shooting manual. Your best bet is to shoot manual, and there are a billion videos online about how to like get the most from your camera. But basically, if you can make it lighter or darker, that's all manual is. It's just letting you manually control how bright or how dark the image is, and a few other things, but whatever. So you would take one image like this, dark, and then you'd immediately take another image like this, light. So what you then do is select 2 images, and I'm not sure if you can do this in GIMP. You can definitely do it in Lightroom, that I'm doing it in, but if not, you can just download what's called a HDR software. And what you do is take 2 images that are exactly the same scene, just different highlights and shadows, and then come over in whatever software you use and just merge them. In Lightroom, you go here to Photo Merge and click HDR. Click it and it'll chunk through it and do its work. So while this is working, I think Lightroom is really cheap. And if you're serious about like taking nice pictures and making sure that they look great, it'd be a really good investment. It's like, I think legally, the version that I use is legal, and it's like £6 a month, £7 a month, or something like that. You can get really good deals, especially if you're a student. You can get much better deals, and yeah, like it's really worth it. So as you can see, it's got all the information from the really well exposed image down here in the bottom half of the image, and the really well exposed sky here in the top. So you click merge, just like that, and then it'll create a HDR. So it's combining the best parts of the 2 images to try and make the best bell curve that's not really really shadowed or really highlighted. It's perfect in the middle, just here. So this is going to chunk through, and then it's just a case of like really simple video, like editing. I'll show you some other examples. So this is an image I took the other night down at the beach around here. So this is, yeah, just some cool like motorbike, dirt bike that was on the thing with like a surfer. So originally this image looked like, come on, this. So actually thinking about it, it's more of a colour thing that I've done on this, just to kind of pop the sunset vibes, all that Instagram shit. But basically all I did with this is all the highlights up here, I just kind of took them down a bit, then increase the contrast just a little bit, increase your shadows, and then probably added a little curve, just and I can explain what this is later. It's kind of, you see how all the blacks are like muted as opposed to completely normal. You kind of get that muted look. Yeah, and then I probably went into here, shadows. Let's do something like that. I forget exactly what I did. Figure out what I did now. Yeah, so I changed the shadows to be blue and changed the highlights to be pink. So you can literally just change it whichever way you want, but the way I've done it makes it seem kind of sunsetty, you know, all romantic and all that crap. Anyway, right, so it's chunked through this. It should have done anyway, and it's made a HDR. So we can now go and have a look at it and see what it looks like. Let's grab this. Oh, where's it put that? Sorry, this is my whole library. I'm just going to be a bit of a bitch to scroll through, but whatever. Okay, so those images are around here. Okay. Okay, yeah, cool. So this is the HDR image that it kicked out. And as you can see, you've got nice, bright shadows, really kind of well exposed middle highlights. The issue is it just looks a bit shit. It looks a bit flat. There's no real like difference. Like the issue is that the highlights up here are about the same brightness as the shadows down here. So what I do now, oh, this isn't even the image. This is the one that it gave us. Is it? Yeah, HDR. So I'll reset it. Yeah, this is the image. So we'll just crop it, make sure it's the right size, and then here, just bring down the shadows, add a bit of contrast, the whites down, blacks, so yeah, a bit more of them. Shove a cheeky little tone curve on, and then dehaze just a little bit. Then you can add in a little vignette if you really want to. I don't tend to, but I'm just showing you how you can like kind of make a nice image quite quickly. Just increase the brightness a little bit. And then you've got other options, like you can add in a filter, a gradiated filter like this that just adds a little bit of selective brightness to the area. And just like that, you can quite simply, I understand I've just kind of blitzed through it to show, just do step A, step B, and then all of a sudden, sick image. But the main things to take away, HDR, good, so you can blend the shadows from one image and the highlights of another image. So one sec. Oh, quality. Right, so go there then. Anyway, yeah, so shoot RAW. So change it in your camera settings to be changed from JPEG to RAW. And just get to grips with the shadows sliders on GIMP. Get rid of the highlights where you can.